Hello, everyone. We have Bill Macaitis with us today. Bill is the founder and CEO of SaaS CMO Pro and an experienced leader who has played a pivotal role in scaling not one, not two, but actually three of the fastest growing SaaS companies in history: Slack, Zendesk, Salesforce. It doesn't get bigger than this, right? And Bill has this track record of implementing innovative go to market strategies and building world class marketing teams, which has led to five successful exits. Welcome, Bill. It's a pleasure to have you out here.
Oh, thanks so much for having me. It's a joy to be here.
Great. So let's dive into the questions because there's so much to cover. So obviously worked with some of the most iconic SaaS companies. Can you share your journey and what inspired you to build SaaS CMO Pro uh, to guide aspiring unicorns and decacorns and scaling SaaS businesses efficiently?
Yeah, sure. So one, I just know how hard it is, right? Like, I think those are some awesome brands, and I feel so grateful to be a part of it. But it's hard. I think anytime you're growing a SaaS company, um, it's really difficult, right? And I think people like to sometimes focus on, the end state, the success, but they forget how hard it was and the ups and downs getting there. So, my journey was I had spent about 30 years doing online marketing. I spent 15 years in the B2C side. I did a startup right out of college. It was in the gaming space. We grew to 10 million members and sold that. I worked for some really large media companies. So IGN Entertainment, Rotten Tomatoes, News Corp, which had all the like Wall Street Journal and Fox Sports and all their properties. And I think I really focused in on my learning a little bit more of the brand side there, learning how to create these brands that had vibrancy and how to bring them to life. And also just learning how to grow and scale, these consumer type properties. And so, uh, I got a call from Salesforce and they wanted to bring in some B2C DNA, and that's what Mark was looking for. And so, I joined them rather early in their journey, right? And it was really interesting, right? Because I think the B2B playbook was so different than the B2C playbook. So I tried to always just bring the best elements to both with me. So, spending time at Salesforce and then Zendesk going through an IPO as a CMO, and then another IPO as Slack with CMO, CRO. And it was just kind of a really fun experience. And I just know, like, the ups and downs. Again, that's why I created SaaS CMO Pro, is just, kind of democratize this information. Like, I'm not selling anything. There's nothing there. There's just tons of good content for, whether you're a marketer, a founder, a VC, just someone that wants to learn a little bit more about modern marketing and growth techniques. They're going to help you grow and scale faster.
Awesome. No, so excited about that. So, you obviously seen firsthand what works at some of the fastest growing SaaS companies. What are some of the key lessons and playbooks? Like you were saying, hey, I'll share with you the secrets and the learnings. So, what are some of the key lessons and playbooks that have stuck with you from these experiences, which you post in terms of videos, and also like, how do you apply these insights when defining and accelerating go to market for other companies?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think the first is I've always tried to adopt a more modern go-to-market playbook. And the thing with if you're in the B2B space, right, there's a very much temptation to kind of use, I would argue, a very dated playbook. It's a playbook that's centered around press releases, running events, and doing outbound SDR and cold calling people, right? And that's just kind of like how that's how B2B businesses worked. But again, like I think that like you can pull in a lot of the best of how consumer B2C grows. I also think that just go to market is constantly evolving, right? A lot of times what you happen is, and I don't fault anyone for this, but a lot of times the founders of the company have a technical background, right? They might come up on the programming side or on the development side or on the product side. And so the go to market, the marketing, the sales, success support is all a little bit new for them. And sometimes what you do is you'll bring in like just like an older playbook, right? Like from a leader that comes in that wants to implement that. So I think one, if you're a founder, just be willing to embrace a newer playbook. That could mean things like a high velocity business, going after SMBs, PLG, targeted ABM, virality loops. Like there's so many more advances in go to market. And now, of course, with the AI coming out, there's even more, ways to do it and different ways to kind of get ahead of the competition. So, I would say one, like embrace a more modern playbook. The second thing that's worked really well for me is just embracing a customer centric playbook. And it sounds a little weird because I think like all of us intuitively are like, yeah, I'm about the customer and we love the customers, right? But a lot of times what we do on the go to market side, we don't give good customer experiences, right? Like, all those teams I listed off, sales, support, marketing, customer success, are a lot of times the first touches people are having with your company. And a lot of times, if you use an older playbook, or even if you use a playbook that's not very customer centric friendly, you're kind of pissing them off at every stage, right? You're cold calling them, you're pressuring them to buy before they're ready. If you're marketing, you're gating all your content. So they have to fill out these long forms and they're going to get called immediately before they can figure out what you do. In support, we make them go through all these hoops to even find support, right? And when they do, it takes, weeks that's there to help you, ultimately is just, a sales team in disguise, right? That's trying to get you to buy more. So, when you kind of take those playbooks, you tend to, in my experience, piss off people. And on the flip side, when you take the flip side and like, hey, how can we give great, delightful experiences? You tend to have people that appreciate that and enjoy it and tend to recommend you more. And if you want to grow fast, there's no faster way to grow than just people having a great experience with your brand and telling three or four of their friends or coworkers, right? Like that's how you grow super fast.
Absolutely. And Bill, can you like dive into some specific examples of like what the modern playbook looks like, right? Like when you say viral videos and probably like LinkedIn thought leadership and all those things, like specific examples of how to do some of these things. I know they're in the video, but like some of the top learnings.
Yeah. Yeah, sure, sure. So I think one is, and I kind of learn this on the consumer side, is go where your customers are, go where they spend their time, right? And so think about it, like, during your daily life, where do you spend the most time? And for most people, it's here. It's on your mobile phone. It's, we're scrolling on LinkedIn or Twitter or X or TikTok or Instagram, right? Like we spend a huge amount of our time there. And a lot of times it's like, hey, we'll go there, right? Create content that you know, is where the people are. So like I think a lot of B2B brands tend to lag behind this. They're like, okay, well, we need to, pay off Gartner so we can be in the highest magic quadrant, right? Or we need to send a press release, we need to do an event. And again, those all kind of work, but they're a little more expensive. And I would say, like, hey, a little more modern playbook would be, hey, just meet users where they are, speak in an authentic tone. So, a more practical example would be, hey, create shorts, create, 7-second, 15-second shorts that can be shown on LinkedIn, X, TikTok. And, talk about pain points that people have in your space, right? Don't just sell your company, just talk about pain points, create a connection. And that's a great, more modern way to go where people are. The other one I would say, obviously, is, hey, embrace AI. There are incredible AI solutions that are coming out for every workflow, for every process in marketing and targeting, and sales, right? And obviously, we're even moving now beyond kind of assistants to true autonomous agents, right? And so I would just say, like, hey, with those, don't be afraid to try them, right? And be the ones that are trying it first versus the last ones to use it, because I think by the time you move over to and you're the last cohort, your competitors will already be ahead of you.
So that's a great point. Uh, how do you keep up with that? And what are some of your recommendations based on your learnings of the tools which are super helpful right now in sales and marketing space?
Yeah, sure. So it's hard, and I get it, right? It's like anytime a new technology shift happens, you have to spend a lot of time. So I remember, when SEO really started becoming more predominant, there were no classes or anything for this. I just remember every night after work, I spent like 4 hours and I read every forum I could. I read every article I could. And I think it's kind of the same with AI now. Obviously, there's a lot more resources now. There's great podcasts, great YouTube channels, great articles on different AI tools. But I think one, just spend some time on it, whether it's at work, after work. Again, it's like something we all kind of need to learn. As far as like, hey, which tools I like personally, so I create a lot of content. And so literally every single stage of creating content, I'm using an AI tool to assist there, right? So everything from the basic LLMs, the Geminis, the Anthropics, the ChatGPTs, to go through and think about, hey, what should this title be? Can you summarize this article? Can you, reuse it in my style and tone, right? Because when you create content, like I do a lot of video content, but then I want to repurpose it on LinkedIn. I want to repurpose it on X. So a lot of times it's writing the article for me based off my video, and then I'll go through and I'll tweak it there. You have AI that does all the transcription for it. They'll look at my video, do the transcription very quickly. You have AI for thumbnails, for video creation, for localization. I mean, there really is no limit. And I think it's like whatever field you're in, whether you're in, demand gen, whether you're in, content marketing, whether you're in product marketing, there are great AI tools that'll help you for each stages of that. And I think it's just, just play around with it. I mean, this is a good time to play around with it too, because everyone kind of expects there's going to be some mistakes, right? Like it's okay. It's like it'll create a little funky output, or sometimes you'll just misuse the tool a little bit, but that's okay. We're all learning. So, that's what I do. And again, I just listen to a lot of podcasts on this. The Marketing AI Institute is a fantastic podcast. They do a weekly podcast and kind of summarize what's happening in the AI space. And obviously, there's a lot of YouTube channels that just talk about like, hey, new AI tools that are coming out. And I cover some of those as well on my YouTube channel. So there's a lot of great resources out there.
Great. And you talked about PLG, right? How do
Yeah.
you make it frictionless? Like, what are some of the key things you have observed where people just don't get it, and we see that over and over again with founders and products, right? Like pricing, adoption friction, cognitive or invite friction. Like, can you talk a little bit more about some of those friction areas?
Yeah, so I love product-led growth. If you like PLG, or if you want to learn about PLG, I have about 30 videos on that, most of which are released. I still have some that are coming up on my SaaS CMO Pro channel. You can go to saascmopro.com, or my YouTube channel, SaaS CMO Pro. But PLG is both amazing and really hard. And one of the reasons it's difficult is it's a newer playbook, right? So a lot of founders or sales executives that are familiar with an old playbook, an outbound SDR, cold call in, selling top down, it's a very different model. It's this model of like, hey, you're creating a frictionless product that spreads virally within companies, where you have bottoms up sales, you have freemium models. It's an easy to use product. It's a fun to use product. And you can measure all this stuff in PLG, whether that's like daily active users or net promoter score or product qualified leads. You had asked specifically about friction, and it's just a concept I bring up because there's a lot of forms of friction. Um, Adoption friction, right? That's when people come in, and how hard is it just to start using your product, right? How
Mhm.
long does it take to get to value? I remember I was advising a SaaS company, and I asked them like, hey, how long does it take before someone gets their first aha moment? How much work is involved? They're like 3 months. And I'm like, that's a long time, right? That's a long time to gut it out if you're just a user. Like, all right, I'm putting in 3 months of pain before I actually get some value out of here. So there's that. There's referral friction, your invite friction, and that's just how easy it is for people to go and recommend others, right? And for them to come in, you can measure that. There's a whole K factor, metric associated with that. There's cognitive friction. Cognitive friction is just like, hey, when you're kind of looking at what the company does or even how it works, like, is it really complex, or have you really simplified it? There's pricing friction, right? So, do you have a free trial plan? Do you have a free plan, right? Or is the only way for you to start using this is you have to pay some significant dollars, right? All these elements of friction just really slow down the process, right? And I think just like recognizing that, hey, that's going to be a big impediment to your growth, recognizing those friction points, coming up with metrics that measure that friction, where that's time to value, daily active users, net promoter score, product qualified leads. There's tons of great PLG metrics, and I have a whole video just on that if you want to dive into it. But it's important, right? And I just say because it stands in contrast to the old model of SaaS and enterprise, where you just sold into the enterprise. It didn't matter if your product was good or bad. You were just trying to sell it into the top levels. Enterprise maybe would buy it, and it would take a long time for them to attrit. But you weren't growing fast. No one knew about you. Most people like didn't like your product. It was hard to use. And I would argue that's because like you hadn't really took the time to understand PLG or even the metrics associated with it that revolve around friction.
Right? No, that's great advice. I mean, definitely people should check out that video. Another one, Bill, is like, we love this video where you break down SMB versus enterprise decision founders face. And we are actually in that boat where we are facing the same decision.
Yeah.
Can you share some trade-offs people should consider, right? Like Like, how do people think about, should I focus on mid-market enterprise or should I focus on SMBs or both?
Yeah,
Right?
it's a big decision. It's a difficult decision. I think it's a decision all SaaS and AI companies are forced with, right? And kind of early, you kind of have to make that decision, right? So, I do the SaaS CMO Pro. I also help actively advise SaaS and AI companies, either as a board member or as an advisor. And this topic comes up a lot, right? And I would just say, like, the usual temptation is to go straight to the enterprise,
Mhm.
because the enterprise, mid-market enterprise, is generally where you make your money, right? It's where the big bucks are. It's where you can turn around your ARR pretty quickly if you land a couple of big deals. Um, I would say the consequences, though, of going straight to the enterprise are numerous, right? And the problem is, if you skip the SMB, you tend to skip having to build a simple, easy to use product, right? So you don't necessarily need it if you go straight to the enterprise, but that has long term consequences, right? Like, again, people don't like it. You're not growing fast. It's hard. The only way you can go in is really through brute force, through sales, right? So going into the SMB allows you, it incentivizes you to build a simple to easy to use product, right? It also tends to have you grow much faster because more people are using your product. So
Yeah.
let me contrast this, right? Like, if you just sell straight to the enterprise, maybe you have 100 clients, a million ARR each, you're a 100 million ARR company. But there's literally only 100 customers that use you, right? There's just physically not that many people that even know about your company or talk about your company. When you go after an SMB audience and you combine it with some more advanced tactics like a freemium plan, all of a sudden you have thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions of people using you, right? And you can kind of see, like, how that helps your brand and how it helps you grow and expand. And what we found at Slack a lot as well was people would go from people switch jobs, right? Look at anybody's LinkedIn, right? They're in a tiny company, they're in a giant company, they're mid. People take tech with them, right? So a lot of times they would take that tech with the SMBs with it. I think for me, ultimately, it boils down to SMBs are kind of a subsidized marketing channel. You don't make a ton of money in SMBs, but they really help with your marketing. They incentivize you to build a scalable enterprise, right? Like, you can't throw tons of customer success at every SMB client. The unit economics just don't work. You can't throw tons of sales at every SMB client. But if you build high velocity, if you build a simple, easy to use product, you don't need tons of sales. You don't need tons of customer success, right? So it's kind of like it incentivizes you to build it the right way. The last consequence, or kind of trade off you have to factor in, is that if you skip SMB, SMB is a great moat to have, because when most competitors come in and most startups, right? There's a VC listening to this, and they probably funded 10 companies this year, and maybe a couple are in your space, right? And a lot of times the first segment they go after is the SMB space.
Yeah.
So if you've just left that alone or not even have an offering there, well, it's an easy one for them to get established. And then guess where they go once they get established in SMB? They go up market, right? And
Yeah.
now they have an easy to use, fun product that has virality loops, that's growing super fast, that everyone knows about. And they're competing with you, right? Where you have a hard to use product that no one knows about, that you've only been able to get in through brute force sales. You can kind of see, like, the uncomfortable dynamics that brings, right? So I would just say, like, it's a little bit nuanced. If you want to really dive into this, like I said, I did a video just on this topic, but it's a really big decision. And I would just say, like, hey, yourself as a founder and the board, like, really weigh these trade-offs that you have, because they are serious and will, really enhance or hurt your growth down the line.
Right. No, this is a super interesting topic, right? Because one thing
Yeah.
which you mentioned, what I'm hearing from you is, hey, build your presence with the SMB, sharpen your axe, and then go towards enterprise, because you'll get more leniency in terms of usability, but it'll pay long dividends in the long run. So even if you
Absolutely.
go towards enterprise, make sure you kind of understand the SMB market and really, like, get your product right. Right? Is that fair?
Absolutely. Yeah,
Right.
yeah. And so really, for Salesforce, Zendesk, Slack, we all started with SMB first.
Yeah.
And then we moved up to mid-market and enterprise. It doesn't mean when you focus on SMB, you're like, hey, we're going to stay in SMB our entire lives. There's a couple companies like Intuit, Quicken, that have mostly focused on the SMB, but I would say most the prevalent majority is like, hey, you start with SMB, but then you move up market. But it
Right.
forces you to have a more sustainable, scalable, faster growth go-to-market model. And I think that's a big consideration for a lot of companies, especially now, right? That are thinking about just not only how do we get growth, but how do we get capital efficient growth?
Absolutely. And on that, right? Like two things. One, the biggest thing which people face in SMB is churn.
Yeah,
Like even if you have a great product, right? Like what we are seeing in our space is 25 to 30% is almost like golden state
yeah,
annual churn, right? Like we're talking about annual churn here. Like if you have less than 20, you're doing like wildly crazy, some great thing, you're out of the league. 25 to 30 is like good churn. 40 to 50 is when people start getting concerned.
yeah.
How do you account for that? How do you deal with that?
Yeah, I think one is just, as you said, accept that SMBs are going to churn, right? They're small businesses, they go out of business or they get bought, or there's just a lot of businesses that are constantly coming in and out of the market. And so you have to realize that, hey, that's just going to happen. A, B, I would say, like, I've done another video just on what I think are the most important metrics that a SaaS or AI founder should focus on. But a big one is net promoter score. And when I found, when you have a very high net promoter score, your churn is very low. When you don't know what your net promoter score is, or you haven't focused any time on that, you tend to have high churn, right? And churn is difficult. It can really throw off the unit economics. That being said, I wouldn't avoid SMB just for the churn, right? Like if you have really crazy churn, it just means, hey, you're not delivering value quickly. Your product's too hard to use. There's too much friction. Like I said, I'd probably say if you have that level of churn, I would really take a step back and go, whoa, are we even looking at the right metrics? Are we looking at the right concepts? And you can definitely turn that around to where now you have small churn and you have massive growth. Like all these people are having great experiences. They're getting value. They're recommending you. You're leveraging more modern marketing growth techniques. You're, growing like crazy. And that's the state you want. And now it's like, okay, you're way higher on awareness. Um, you've got a great beachhead. You're moving into the mid market. You have tons of referenceable, happy customers. Like that's a very sustainable go to market model.
Absolutely. And one final thing on that, right, is the brand,
Yeah.
right? Like HubSpot is early stage. The moment you start going like to 50, 100 million ARR, you switch to Salesforce.
Yeah.
Right? Like, I've seen so many companies who have done that, right? So it's almost like a branding thing. Like you start with Apollo, but then you're scaling and Zoom Info's pitches. Apollo is like SMB's poor man Zoom Info, right? So how do you then make sure that the brand is not like, oh, this is for SMBs and this is for enterprise, which we have seen in some cases. Like it need not necessarily just be the quality, it's just the brand, which is like, oh, we are here, we need to move to this
Yeah.
company.
Yeah. So a couple things. I think this is a universal challenge, right? When I was at Salesforce, same argument. When they were young, right? It was like, oh, you use Salesforce when you're an SMB, but then you go to Oracle, or a big safe company, right? Or Zendesk. Hey, use Zendesk when you're little, but then you go to Service Desk or ServiceNow or just a different, more complete option, right? And even Slack, it was like, oh, it's all SMBs use it, right? We need a bigger system or reliable system, whatever it is. So this is something every startup has to go through. And like you said, a big sometimes perception is the brand. So I do argue, and I've done a couple videos on this on the SaaS CMO Pro channel, is like, hey, if you're a SaaS or an AI founder, you do need to pay attention to brand. Like,
Yeah.
I know sometimes this is a temptation. We're just going to hire a massive demand gen team or a massive SDR team, and that's our quote unquote marketing. But like my background, I spent 15 years on the B2C side, and we would, obsess over brand and not just this nebulous concept of brand, but we measure it like, hey, what's our aided recall, our unaided recall, our sentiment, our share voice, share conversation. There's tons of good metrics you can use to measure brand and measuring, your company's and marketing's efficiency towards it. So I do think it's important to, focus on the brand, measure your brand. I'll say this: when you have a high net promoter score, when you're creating great experiences, those customers tend to want to stay with you
Right.
as you move up market. I remember when we were Zendesk, some of our biggest customers were small and pulled us up, right?
Yeah.
So I remember Uber started using us when they were super little, and all of a sudden they're getting massive, and they still wanted to use us, even if we didn't have the capabilities. But they're like, hey, you need to build this, and they worked with us, right? So I think you
Right.
just have to have a concerted effort, focus on the brand side, focus on your messaging, your positioning, your competitive. That's a lot of blocking and tackling on the product marketing side that you need to get good at. But it is a natural thing. Like no matter what show me any company and I'll show that they're huge and I'll show them when they were small and they had the same argument put against them.
Right. No, that's a great thing. Bill, multiple other questions, but one, Wayne Chiang just said, Bill, he's just calling out your name. Seems like you might know each other. Um, then I say, I hope I'm getting the name right. Says, imagine you're an e-signature company using Nitro on cloud. The people you send the documents to sign are also end users, even if they are not subscribers. Kind of like the DocuSign thing, saying every time I get a Nitro or a DocuSign, that's a viral loop, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's a great question from Rain. Definitely, like I think you have to, and a great point he puts out is that you have to think about these more advanced ways to grow, and we'll call them viral growth, feedback loops. And sometimes, depending on the company, you will have a situation to where, like, you could say DocuSign, all they should focus on is just other companies or B2B, but in their model, DocuSign, Nitro, whoever, right, get accept, they are sending documents out to people that aren't your customers, right? And so, what is that experience? How do they
Yeah.
interact with your brand? How do they get exposed to it? Do they have an easy way to try it out? Again, pricing friction, cognitive friction. Like spending time on it and even measuring it, right? You can measure every month, right? Like what's our K factor and how quickly are we allowing people that are get exposed to our product to grow and scale? Like those are the things that I think like help you grow fast, right? And again, like even going against some of these traditional norms, which is the only way you sell is top down into an organization. There's massive playbooks on how to do seed and grow and move within a company. At Slack, we spend a lot of time on just we use Net Promoter Score. I loved it, but we would get it down to the individual level. And we could say, hey, okay, someone in Southeast Asia and IBM started using us. Maybe it's only like a 30-person design team, right? But they're using us. And IBM's a big account. There's like, 300,000 people that work there. So, okay, like, all right, of those 30 people, wow, two of them scored us a 10 out of 10 on the latest NPS survey. Two of them said, like, oh my God, you guys are amazing. We love you. It's like transformed how we work. They're probably good ones to ask. Like, hey, would you mind inviting us to another team? Or could we talk to someone in procurement? Or could we talk?
Right.
And so I think there's a whole playbook around evangelism, around seed and grow, around having kind of a virality loop. And, Wayne does a great job of, talking about that to where these are really powerful for your long-term growth.
Absolutely. And just to say that, right, like it's not Wayne, it's IZ who asked the question. Wayne just said, he just called you out, right? So just saying that. But two final questions, Bill. I know we are running out of
Yeah.
time. One is 1 to 10 versus 10 to 100. Very different journeys. And we are seeing, again, that's the other thing. A lot of the SMB focused companies like Slack is more of an exception than the norm, right? Like if you see like how many enterprise focused companies go to 100 million plus in revenue versus SMB companies go to 100 million plus in revenue, the the ratios are different,
Yep.
obviously. I mean, right? So how does that playbook come into play? Like if you were to advise someone who's hit 10 million, right, and they want to go to 100, most of the customer base is SMB. They probably want to move up market as well, but like how do they go from 10 to 100?
Yeah. So it's like I said, it's a natural extension. And I do think I recommend, as opposed to just staying in SMB, start moving up. Doesn't mean you
Okay.
need to go straight to like, Fortune, 500, but start moving into the mid market and, understand their pain points. What's unique about this market? You are going to have to change up your go to market, your marketing a little bit, how you target, how you find these, how you nurture, how you educate. But it's a pretty proven playbook that you can move up markets. So, it just takes, like I said, a lot of time, a lot of energy, a lot of ups and downs, where possible. Again, like I really advocate for a more customer centric playbook, advocate for a more modern playbook. And, especially for a product type founder, technical founder, just know that the go to market is changing and evolving as fast as it is on the technical side. Just as like you may look like 3 years ago and look at your technical architecture and going, "God, it's already dated." Like there's so many new things that are out there. The same thing's happening on the go to market side. So just make sure you're open minded and willing to embrace newer AI concepts, newer go to market, PLG, freemium, all these like different, more advanced virality loop factors that are going to help you grow and scale faster.
Uh, we got a question saying, can you share some of the virality loops you used in your experience, right? Like which have worked, either at like any of these three companies
Yeah.
or companies you've advised.
I would say that the biggest ones are, so at Slack, we spent a lot of time. We had a growth team that just focused on the entire flow. Like when someone gets invited, how do they come? I think actually Slack did a magic password link, which was really nice. Like you didn't have to remember your password. You could just click a link and it would just take you there and you'd be authenticated in. That was a big one. I think how easy it is just to recommend other people, within the product. Can you do that? Some products, you have to go to the admin to invite others, or some don't even allow it, right?
Yeah.
Do you have a freemium model? Freemium's naturally encouraged. I've done a ton of videos just on freemium. I know there's a lot of myths and people are scared about it, but in my eyes, that's a great way to, increase virality. There's tons of different ones out there. And again, there's metrics you can measure against it, but those are a couple of my favorites.
And like freemium, so thanks, Mohit, for that question. Free versus freemium versus like free trials. Any thoughts on those?
Absolutely. So I am big in the freemium camp.
Yeah,
I think, look, the evolution of SaaS software was, it started with, you couldn't even do free trials.
right.
There was nothing, right? Then it was like you could do a free trial, but it was usually user limit or time limited. So you can only use it for, 3 days or 7 days, or you can only have 4 users on it. And then it started opening up to freemium where, you had this frictionless environment. People could go in, but it was very crippleware. You free plan, but you can only use 3 things and it's hard to use. And to the more advanced, I would say Nirvana state, which is a freemium plan where people can use all the features. The user level features are all ungated. But what you really do is you set up thresholds on the enterprise requirements. So things like single sign-on or an SLA of 99.9% or dedicated customer success manager. The things you need as an enterprise, single sign-on, like those are the ones you had to pay to move up for. So I would just say this, there's a whole playbook around how to create the right type of freemium. Like I said, I've done videos just on that if you're interested. That's one of the biggest things. Pricing and packaging is the biggest levers you have as a company for your long-term growth. So definitely encourage you to go to freemium side if you can.
And final question. A lot of people have started posting their growth metrics. Hey, we went to 1 million in the last year, 3 million. And do you think that helps or hurts the brand? Because sometimes it's like, I mean, you're saying this and you're showing your growth, but then if it doesn't grow, or people are like, oh yeah, there's still 3 million ARR, right? Like,
I think it helps. I know it's like a little tough, but it's like we're constantly posting our growth and our stats. I mean, obviously, if you stop growing, you got to switch to a different playbook. But I would just say this: like, what everyone has to realize is that whatever space they're in, you're going to have 10 competitors. Even if you're the only competitor right now, the VCs will fund another dozen competitors. Most of them are going to be pure AI. And so you're constantly competing for mind share. You're constantly competing for people to just notice who you are and what's going on. And I think that's one small playbook. And hey, how do you get recognized? I do think like most B2B brands are way too boring and conservative, and they don't have any type of unique visual identity. They don't have a mascot. They don't have a unique tone and voice. They're just boring. So you got to realize like the boring ones are going to get ignored. The ones that have some spice, say something fun, have a mascot, have a unique visual color palette, those ones are going to get noticed, and they're the ones that are going to get remembered.
Bill, what a powerhouse session. Like really enjoyed it. We went 5 minutes over. We can go 30 minutes over. I'll keep it on LinkedIn. Would love to stay in touch. And, we should we'll go through more videos and probably schedule another session if you're open to it.
Of
On
course.
not covered here.
No, that's fun. I love talking about these topics. If you're interested, go to SaaS CMO Pro. But I love this stuff. So happy to talk anytime.
Yeah. Thanks so much. Pleasure.